Monday comes early. This chapter closes. A new door opens. This is the second shift.
Over my time taking care of patients, talking to many retirees that were bored out of their minds, that retired without a plan, didn't know what they were going to do, and they were either just bored all the time or they ended up going back to work. And so I think that's, in my mind, the absolute most important thing is before you retire, have a plan in how you're going to fill your time, no matter what it is.
What if the goal isn't a bigger house, a higher income, or more impressive resume, but simply having the freedom to live life the way you actually want? Today's guest is a retired physician who made a mid-career pivot away from internal medicine, built a cash-based aesthetics practice, and then ultimately stepped away from it all in his late 50s. And now he spends his time traveling the world. What stands out about his story isn't just how he left medicine, it's what he's built since. His version of retirement isn't about excess or luxury, it's about experience. It's about being intentional with both time and money. It's about creating a life that feels aligned with what matters most to him. He now spends much of his time traveling the world with his wife, planning each trip in detail, immersing himself in each destination, and doing it all in a very practical, grounded way, and then sharing his experiences with others on his blog. We're going to talk about the decisions that led him here, the pivot, the business, the exit, and what life actually looks like on the other side of medicine. In many ways, this is a conversation about what true wealth can actually look like in real life when you match your passion with intention and create the freedom to live life on your own terms. So with that, let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Second Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Steven Jepson, along with my co-host, Aaron Millage. I'm especially excited today to introduce our guest, mostly because it gives me a chance to torture him in public. I'm just kidding, Steve. Our guest today is my older brother, Dr. Steven Jepson, also a retired physician who now spends his time slow traveling the world and writing about it on his blog, thethoroughtripper.com. We'll talk a little bit about what that means to slow travel. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about him, because I think there's a lot about his story that's going to appeal to a lot of our listeners, especially those who are facing their own second shifts, who are really trying to lean into their outside hobbies and interests once they leave their high impact careers. I think Steve's been a great example of that. So a little bit about him, his bio. Steve graduated from the University of Utah Medical School in 1993. Ooh. He did a residency in Portland, Oregon in internal medicine, began building his private practice in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. But after only 8 years in practice, he decided he'd had enough of internal medicine, feels eternal, internal medicine, and founded a cash-based aesthetic medicine clinic where he spent the rest of his career. So in his late 50s, he sold that practice and formally retired from medicine, and now spends most of his time pursuing a long-held passion of travel. So 2 major shifts. We're going to dive deeper into each of those. Aaron, let's start with you. What would you like to know?
Okay, so I'm going to frame it for everybody because I think this is the getting it right. There are going to be some great threads to pull on, right? Because Dr. Jepson, you left internal medicine.
Oh, you don't have to call me Dr. Jepson. I haven't been Dr. Jepson for 4 years.
I'm so used to calling
years.
Brian Dr. Jepson that
really, he makes you call him Dr. Jepson.
Yeah,
that sounds
I
about
require
right.
that of him, actually.
Yeah. It's
especially
really
just
mean.
in casual conversation.
Yeah.
Do you have to throw an Esquire at the end?
Only on text, not in conversation.
All right.
So yes, okay. So Steve, you left internal medicine mid-career, not even mid-career, but sort of in the dawn of the career, to start a cash pay aesthetics practice. Well, we're going to get into that. Sold it, retired. How many years into retirement are you right now?
A little over 4.
Okay. Traveling the world, you write a blog about it. You didn't build an empire, you just got out. And so that is the thread that I think is most interesting to me to pull on. So we're just going to start at the beginning, and we're going to find out all about you and how this applies to folks that are possibly in the same situation. So right off the bat, given the transition from one specialty to another, you started in internal medicine. What drew you there in the first place?
The challenge of it. I mean, I always like to solve a puzzle, a mental puzzle, and that's really what internal medicine is. Ironically, even though I opened up an aesthetic medicine practice and did that for 16 years, when I was in medical school, I didn't really love procedures. I really loved more the intellectual pursuit of medicine. And I really liked the idea of being somebody's primary care doctor and taking care of a broad range of problems and knowing a little about a lot of things rather than a lot about not very many things. And so that's really what initially drew me to internal medicine, and that's what I did.
And then you did the opposite.
Yes.
I did the opposite. So then I did the complete opposite.
The question, and I know from I'm sure Brian's work, my work with clients, there is a moment, and it could be the Hemingway bankruptcy. How did you end up in bankruptcy? Slowly at first, and then all of a sudden. So that moment could be sudden. It could be gradual, but feels sudden when it finally arrives. But what was that moment for you when you knew you needed to make a change?
I think I enjoyed maybe the first 5 years of internal medicine, but after then I really was not happy, and a lot of it was because internal medicine wasn't what I thought it was going to be. A lot of that has to do with the nature of the American healthcare system to a certain degree. Instead of having the time that I thought I would have to sit down with somebody and work through, their various problems, instead I had 15 minutes to try and get through 3 very complicated medical problems, and we both leave the room frustrated. And I also found that I was taking care of far more mental health issues than I anticipated, because your physical health is very much tied to your mental health, and I found myself as much prescribing psychiatrist as I was an internist. I also was practicing internal medicine at the peak of the opioid crisis. And so the other thing that I was doing all day was negotiating with people over pain medicine. And I would look at my schedule. I'd make it a point not to look at my schedule the night before so that I could get some sleep. But then I'd look at the schedule when I get there in the morning, and I'd see names that I didn't want to see. And I'd see things, I'd anticipate all the negotiation that would be going on in terms of prescribing this and prescribing that. That's not why I went into internal medicine. And I found that was making up such a significant part of my day that I really just wasn't happy with it. Plus, as a primary care physician working for a healthcare organization like I did, it wasn't really a private practice. I was working for a healthcare organization. You're expected to reach certain milestones in terms of the number of patients you see. I mean, you've heard all of this on some of the other podcasts because I've listened to them too. But that is not the pure practice of medicine. It's the business side, and it's a business side that a doctor doesn't have control over. And that was extremely frustrating as well. And so put all those things together, and I was miserable every day I went to work. I was regretting that decision, and I was trying to figure out a way to make a change. And so I did.
I mean, the interesting thing I feel like is that you're a little bit ahead of your time in some ways, for both setting up a cash-based practice. I mean, when you started doing that, I mean, that's a lot more common now because of the same frustrations that you just expressed in medicine, especially in primary care, how a lot of people are so tired of the system and so tired of the corporatization of the medical world. and also the dealing with insurances and all that kind of stuff, and no control over their time, that they've gone to a direct primary care model, right? Where it's all cash based. It's basically concierge medicine. It's cash based. Don't deal with insurances. And then the doctor now has control over their day. But you move both to a cash based practice, but also away from the things you just said that you loved, that you thought you were going to love about internal medicine, to something that was completely different in the world of aesthetics, which was also kind of before your time in a way. I think med spas are very common now, and a lot of physicians start med spas who aren't plastic surgeons and aren't dermatologists. That wasn't the case when you started it, to my understanding. Is that correct?
I hadn't even heard of the term medical spa, and it wasn't really even my intention. I didn't know what I was doing. The bottom line is I didn't know what I was doing. I knew that I needed to make a change because I could not see myself doing the same thing for another 20, 30 years. I needed to make a change, and it was an accident. It was an accidental stumbling into a med spa type scenario over a couple of years. What we were talking about before, the irony is I hated procedures in medical school. I'm not a handy guy. I don't like house projects. I'm not good at them. I'm not good with my hands in that, and so that's why I never went into those kind of surgical specialties. But one thing I did find is that I was pretty good at primary care procedures, joint injections and mole removals and skin biopsies and kind of those simple primary care procedures. And I found that I enjoyed those. I didn't have to negotiate with people over their Lortab during those procedures. I didn't have to convince somebody that they were actually depressed and needed Prozac rather than having terrible stomach problems. I could just do some simple medical procedures, and I could see myself enjoying that. And there was actually a medical clinic in Michigan that was called a medical procedures clinic, and they had started that kind of business model fairly successfully. And I decided, you know what, I think that sounds like a good way to get out of primary care internal medicine. And so that's what I did. But I also realized that, it may take me a little while to get on any insurance panels, because I think like most places back then, like most states back then, Utah, if you're not allied with the various healthcare organizations in the state, you can't get paid. So I thought it'd probably take a while before I might start to get paid by insurances. So I thought, you know what, I'll get a laser and do some skin procedures, and I'll learn how to do Botox. And those will help pay the bills while I'm waiting to get on all the various insurance panels, and while I wait to build up my primary care procedure clientele. Well, it very quickly became evident that the insurance companies weren't going to work with me, and that it was going to be difficult to build up the primary care procedure clientele. But people were starting to be really interested in lasers and Botox. And so I figured that the way that the clinic was going to succeed was to go that route. And so it evolved over the first maybe year of practice into what I called an aesthetic medicine practice, because aesthetic medicine was starting to be a recognized subspecialty of something. And that's where the clinic went. And I don't even know I think that the term medical spa was starting to be used at the same time, but that's ultimately what it evolved into, was a full-blown medical spa.
So in this process of kind of waking up, I think it's a great visual of avoiding the schedule because you didn't want to see the names. So this sort of the anxiety of the negotiation in internal medicine. So this is happening. You're exploring an exit. Are you talking to colleagues about this? Like, what does that conversation look like professionally, or does it happen at all professionally because that's something you keep close to your chest?
Everybody thought I was nuts. Everybody thought I was nuts because I was a fairly well-respected internist. I was part of a group. We were basically also, did a lot of hospital work at the time. The company that I worked for tried to talk me out of it, but I was done, and I knew that I needed to move on. And honestly, I think I was nuts. I think that if I had known, if I had had any true clear vision of what I was doing, I probably wouldn't have done it. But once you make a move like that, and you have a family and you have a mortgage, you make it work. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question was, 2 years out of that, making that decision, did you look back and say, maybe I shouldn't have done that? Or were you like full on, I'm just going to make it work, like you just said?
Full on, I'm going to make it work. Because I knew that I could always fall back on internal medicine. And I figured that if I was going to fall back on internal medicine, that I'd probably be a hospitalist. And I figured that I could, find a job doing that. But I also, part of the problem is that when you open up an aesthetic medicine clinic / medical spa, you also buy a lot of equipment. And equipment, sometimes if you're then wanting to move on further and offer more services, then you buy some more equipment. And this equipment is extremely expensive. And so I also suddenly had a bunch of leases that I needed to pay. And so if I had gone back to internal medicine, then I would have had all that debt with no way to pay it off. And so it really was just a matter of figuring it out and making it work. And so that's what I did.
So from you're picking up operational expenses, you're picking up capital expenses. Like you have these. In let me back up. The insurance, kind of the modern American medical system that you left,
Yeah.
As faulted as it is, does offer kind of stability and predictability for a physician. You're a W-2 earner. You can kind of assume that the paycheck's going to be nice.
Right.
So you make it a transition into something entirely cash pay and entrepreneurial, and there's uncertainty and variability. It's a big financial professional risk. But you did it. How did you learn? How did you build the airplane while you were flying it?
I wouldn't allow myself to fail. And I just worked my butt off. Because even though for that first year to 2 years, even though there wasn't a lot of patients, every waking minute I was spending trying to figure out how to market and figure out how to build a website. I learned how to build my own website. I remember looking at Google and saying to myself, I need to figure out how to have one of those lines at the top of the page have my clinic's name on it when somebody searches for Botox. And so I figured I taught that to myself. I taught myself SEO. I taught myself Google advertising. I didn't have the money to pay anybody else to do that for me. And so I kept my daily expenses down. I used the time that I had by not having a full day of patients by teaching myself to do all the management stuff that needed to be happening at the same time. And I just basically didn't allow myself to fail. And, we were close. I fortunately made a decision. One of the laser companies gave us some money for marketing, and it was like $5,000, and I decided to take that $5,000 and do TV. Let's go all out. Here's $5,000. Let's do TV. Let's do some TV commercials. With those TV commercials, and nobody was doing TV commercials for aesthetic medicine at the time. Nobody was doing commercials for med spas at that time. There were some billboards around town, but nobody had done TV yet. And so I, paid a local TV station, $5,000. However many commercials you can give me for $5,000, let's do it. And as part of that, they said, you know what? You're spending $5,000. You know what? We'll. How about you come be on our daily morning talk show? And so I did, and got a good response from that. And the TV show liked what I had to say, and so they invited me back again. And I think I got 2 appearances out of those TV commercials. And the phone started to ring. And the phone started to ring enough to allow me to continue to do TV commercials, which then allowed me more spots on the TV show. And that's what's really allowed the business to build and pretty much saved it.
I think the biggest move that you made was putting my name on your door momentarily.
I forgot about that. Brian's name was on the door.
Brian, did you offer any value other than your name? Was
that
even
all I needed?
Probably
That's
not.
all I needed. That's all I needed to offer.
They were like, "Oh, there's 2 doctors here. Oh, then this is a very."
I did live in Utah at the time, and was working in the emergency department, and Steve had started this practice, and obviously ER doctors do a lot of procedures. So I was, we talked about me being part of it. Shortly after my name went on the door, that's kind of when autism hit my life. And so it was like, okay, yeah, sorry, I've got another focus.
So I don't think he ever came to the office, actually.
The name on the door is all it took. Well, let me ask you this.
Matters.
I asked about the professional sort of interaction, and hey, Steve, you're crazy. What are you doing? What about the family interaction? When you told Brian that, hey, I'm leaving internal medicine and I'm doing this, what was that like?
I don't remember. Do you?
I was curious. It was just because I knew that about you, that procedures weren't your thing, and that also you were a very good internist and very cerebral in your approach, and so I was curious but intrigued by it, but yeah, I thought big risk.
Yeah, it was a big risk, and everybody did. I think everybody expected me to be back, practicing internal medicine within 6 months. But it worked out. It worked out, and with success, like any business, with success comes increased expenses, and with increased expenses comes increasing need to pay those expenses, and so it took several years before I really turned a profit. I took out a second mortgage. I took on credit card debt. Ultimately I was able to pay all that off, but again, there was big financial risk as well. So
were you taking those risks kind of calculated because you've seen the commercials pay back, you've seen the TV show appearances pay back, And so these were calculated risks to reinvest in the business. These weren't, I'm just going to grind it just because I can't, I can't show my face back in the hospital if I go back.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they were calculated risks because I knew that if I kept at it, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and there was, but those first couple of years were stressful and scary, for sure.
What surprised you? I'm curious because you're sort of this pioneer, whether you wanted to be or not, in cash pay and kind of the medical aesthetics. What surprised you most about cash pay or cash based practice?
The amount of money people were willing to pay to do cosmetic procedures. I mean, it really was crazy to me that somebody could come in and drop that amount of cash to have these procedures done, and I came to understand that a person's physical self-esteem is as important and sometimes more important than their internal health. Mm. And I came to understand that even though I wasn't offering diagnostic healing value in terms of healing physical ailments, people really still appreciated what I did in terms of making them feel better about themselves. And so I could still take pride in that. So, they were willing to spend that money to gain that value for themselves. And, I always tried to, when I retired, my price per unit of Botox when I started the clinic was the exact same as when I retired. I kept it at the same price. My margins decreased over all that time, but I always felt bad about, it's a bad business move, but I always felt bad about charging so much money to have some of this stuff done. Because I'm a frugal person and I'm like, ugh, I wouldn't spend that much on this. So, I that was always something that really surprised me, yes.
I want to take you now towards the end. And so,
yes.
You ended up retiring, at age 57? Is that right?
I got to think for a minute. I sold my practice on my 56th birthday.
So had you always planned on retiring early, or was that an opportunity that came in your lap and you took it, or how did that go?
I'd always hoped to retire before 65. I'd always hoped to retire in my early 60s, probably. That's kind of the vision that I had. But I also got very tired of practicing aesthetic medicine because it's a different kind of stress. Yes, the clinic ultimately ended up being successful. I was able to pay off the debt. We were able to, grow the practice to where we were very busy, where my schedule was just always packed. I was able to stop, advertising to a certain degree. But I was worn out from practicing aesthetic medicine because cosmetic patients come with a different set of expectations and demands. And that's mentally wearing in a different kind of way. And I was still seeing patients every 15 minutes throughout the day. But, when you're a service provider in that sense, it's like you're dealing with lots of different personalities who are spending lots of money and have expectations that were, because of social media, becoming less and less and less realistic. And I found myself telling people no all the time. No, you shouldn't do this. No, you shouldn't do this. No, you'll look really, you won't look right. I don't want to do that. And so that battle was wearing on me. And the battle of running my own cash pay practice was also just exhausting. Dealing with employees, dealing with, even though it's cash and you're not dealing with insurances anymore, there's still all kinds of running a business stress that in combination with taking care of patients, I was again found myself just mentally worn out, and I just wanted to stop. I needed to stop for my own mental health. So it really became a take care of myself kind of decision. And I realized one day, I looked at my bank accounts and I realized, you know what, I might be able to pull this off. I started really considering, what evaluation on my clinic would be, and got some estimates. And I thought, you know what, if my clinic really can be valued at this with what I have saved, I might be able to pull this off. And the moment that I made that realization, I was done. I had to figure a way to get out. And so unfortunately, I made that valuation and that decision in January of 2020. And what happened 2 months later? It kind of, the floor kind of fell out below me at that point. And so I kind of made this decision to retire, and then I couldn't. And that was extremely painful, because you don't sell a practice when your practice is closed, because we did close for several months. And then when we reopened, we had to be very careful in terms of what we did, and our bottom lines decreased, and consequently the valuation decreased. And so that's kind of how that all sorted out. But I'd made up my mind, and I think Brian knows well, when you've decided to leave medicine, every day you show up at work is painful. Even if it is cosmetic medicine, and sometimes worse.
No, Brian had an advent calendar where he would, as he was getting near the end, he would open it up and take the little chocolate out. Yeah, I got 5 more shifts. Got it.
Yeah.
So, into retirement now, what has surprised you most, good or bad?
I've needed zero effort to fill my time. I've never been bored.
So that was my next question is how to avoid kind of the every day is Saturday problem, because from our conversation, from Brian's telling about you, very cerebral, and how does somebody who goes from liking the challenge of the problem and solving these complex situations go to the potential of, well, every day is Saturday and here I am lounging by the pool?
Well, because I decided on my retirement job, and I do have a retirement job. I decided on my retirement job 2 years before I retired. And so, before I decided, I remember I was having a conversation with Brian one night expressing my frustrations about practicing medicine still. And he asked me, what is it that you want to do? And I said, well, honestly, if I were going to do it all over again, I'd just be a travel blogger. I love to travel. I love to write. I know how to build a website. I would just really like to do that. And then once we hung up, I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, why not? So I started my travel blog at about the same time I started investigating the realism of me retiring. And part of that starting the travel blog was to see is this something that can work, that can occupy my time when I'm retired? Because I did realize that I would be bored out of my mind.
Right.
If I retired and didn't have anything to do. So I started my travel blog 2 years before I retired, before I sold my practice. So my travel blog was already up and going. I knew that it occupied my time, and that's how I keep from getting bored, is I have a passion project that I work on many hours every day. And part of that passion project involves traveling too. And, we travel 3 to 5 months out of the year. And, every day I get up and I look forward to seeing what my blog numbers are and seeing how much blog money I made, and it's fun. So retirement can be fun, and it should be.
I mean, I think that's where you're a great example to our listeners. Actually, I think a lot. I mean, we've had. I think you're our fourth or fifth guest. Yeah. Some of the earlier guests are like, they're starting medical schools and doing all kinds of stuff. I think that what your story adds so much value is that most people don't want to do that. Most people are, they want to retire and they want to enjoy their retirement. And, but, I think a lot of physicians or other people with high impact careers are worried about being bored or losing their impact or just feeling differently about themselves. But I really love how you've taken your passion, something that you really enjoy, your hobby or your interest, and have developed that into not just a second career, but something that fills your time and something that you continue to enjoy. So that's I think that's a great example to all of us, including me, who needs to do a lot better at that.
Well, and Brian and I have had several discussions over the last weeks about coming on this podcast, and I told him that I was concerned about being the guest that doesn't, the first guest that hasn't overachieved, in their second shift. But there is a point where it's nice to just truly enjoy yourself.
So and yes, I agree with Brian. I think that your story in this conversation will resonate far more with listeners, because I think deep down there's everybody hopes to arrive at the place that you are, right? This early retirement. You have this story of you made it happen, right? You will not allow yourself to fail. You achieve success, even at the realization of that success at the end. COVID hit, you had to wait, like these, that level of disappointment, and here you are pursuing, what you accurately called a passion project. So yeah, I think that again, these are very good gold nuggets for the folks that listen to the podcast. As an early, I'm going to use air quotes, early retiree, and especially kind of the way that you guys do extended travel. And I know I'm watching this now in some my own family and some clients, but I assume that now that you're fully retired, you and your wife spend more time together. And so the question that always that we see is what am I going to do with this person now that I'm not working? We spend a lot more time together. And more specifically, what advice would you give a couple approaching this kind of transition where, you're in the prime of life and you have all this time to spend together?
Well, hopefully you're married to your best friend, and that does make a difference. Unfortunately, I am. And I think that in our situation too, we're very independent people, and we're still somewhat independent within the house. And so, we have no problem spending time apart in various parts of the house and coming together and spending times together in parts of the house. My wife still works, and she, since COVID, she works out of the house. We each have our own offices here in the house. And so during the day, we're often both in our own offices taking care of our own business. So she was probably more concerned about it than I was, but I think that I've been able to stay completely occupied and not bug her too much, I think.
How long did it take her to not be concerned? Like, at what point was she like, all right, this is going to work?
I think a couple weeks. I don't know.
Oh,
Could
wow.
call
I think she's still working on it.
I, I could call her in here and ask her, but
So
I can hear her talk.
tell us a little bit more about tell us about Slow Travel. Tell us about your blog. What do you do? What's unique?
Well, you know, travel's always been my passion, but when you're working, you know, a full-time job, you get a few weeks of vacation here and there, and so you go somewhere, you spend a week, and you are mostly tired, and so you relax at a beach, and you call that a vacation. And that's fine, but for me, slow travel means going to a place, a country, a city, and living there, essentially, whether it's for a week or, you know, or whether it's a month. The longest we've stayed somewhere is 2 months in Lisbon, Portugal. You know, you don't stay in a hotel, you stay in a rental, you live in the neighborhood, you go shop in the local stores, you eat in the neighborhood restaurants, you see some sights, but you don't see every site. You know, you hopefully see every site over the time that you're there, but your days are maybe spent seeing one site and spending 2 hours at lunch and strolling around and seeing what you can see. It's about really soaking in and getting to know a culture. And that's what I love to do. And as a blogger, that also gives me the opportunity to really get to know a place a little bit more deeply, so that I think the things that I write about are a little bit more detailed, and that's hence the name The Thorough Tripper, which is the name of the blog.
So if someone is listening and thinking, I don't want to build an empire, I don't want a medical school named after me, I just want to get out and live my life and pursue a passion, what would you tell them? What were things that you wish somebody had told you that may have accelerated or improved the outcome?
Well, I think more than anything, you have to have a reason to get up in the morning, and you have to have a passion project that will occupy your time. And it obviously doesn't have to be something that I do, whether it's, you know, whether you get a job doing something else, or doing volunteer work, or spending time with family. I don't think it matters what it is, but you have to, I think you need to know ahead of time what that thing is. Because I remember, you know, over my time taking care of patients, talking to many retirees that were bored out of their minds, that retired without a plan, didn't know what they were going to do, and they were either just bored all the time, or they ended up going back to work. You know, and so I think that's, in my mind, the absolute most important thing is, before you retire, have a plan in how you're going to fill your time, no matter what it is.
I know you're excited about the reckoning. You've talked about that a lot. But before we get to the reckoning, I have one final question.
All right.
So you ran a successful cash-based aesthetics practice, and you're now a world famous travel blogger. So how did you hone such amazing marketing skills? I hear that advertising is the most important job. Can you expound on that a little bit?
So, you wanting me to tell the story? Are you wanting the story on YouTube and on Spotify for all to know? So
these are the lessons we learned from our very first business.
Brian and I had a business together well before I put his name on my clinic door.
That was our second business.
I actually don't remember what the business was. I think you say that we were selling polywogs.
It's the polywog farm. We were polywog salesmen.
Apparently,
and I'm sure that those who don't know what a polywog is, tadpole is another name for that. So baby frog, right? Polywogs.
And where we grew up, there was a pond that was, I don't know, a quarter mile away. We'd ride our bikes, and we loved nothing more than to collect polywogs and watch them turn into frogs. And I think we decided that everybody in our neighborhood needed to experience that same pleasure. And so, of course, we wanted to make some money somehow. And we're going to sell pollywogs. And so I guess we set up a pollywog stand. Not a lemonade stand, not a Kool-Aid stand, not a snow cone stand, a pollywog stand. And as any successful business person knows, the only way people are going to know that you're selling pollywogs is if you go tell them. And so I think that
as the older brother,
I think I was the brains behind the operation, and somebody needed to stay back and run the business. And so who better to go advertise that we were selling pollywogs on his bicycle than young Brian Jepson. And
so yes, my job was to ride around the neighborhood on my bike yelling pollywogs for sale, pollywogs for sale. And of course, it was, we sold a pollywog, I think, to our next door neighbor, Quinn. And I think that was the only one because, the thing we didn't really understand is that we were selling something nobody wanted. Mm. Number two, they didn't stay pollywogs for very long. So we should have been selling baby frogs. That's how we should have marketed it. And number three, you don't market by yelling from your bike to. So that's how those are the hard lessons we learn. And
here we are 50 years later and Brian's still bitter about it.
I am bitter.
I take it that your trip yelling on the bicycle didn't get you invited to the daytime morning television spot.
No, it did not.
No,
it did not.
Yeah, it did not.
Well, I can see. I can feel the bitterness here.
Even though he did ask me to go around on my bicycle at that time and advertise that he was going to be on TV.
Same method. Hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do the reckoning. I'm ready.
Okay. You ready? Okay. No quibbling. No evasion. First comes to mind.
Hold on. I need a drink for this. And this is water.
Yeah, please.
Not the other kind.
We'll start with a softball. What makes you happy now that would have seemed absurd when you were practicing?
What makes me happy now that would have seemed absurd when I was practicing medicine? See, this is the problem with the reckoning.
Okay. Go off screen really quickly. That's a hard question. I can't even think of that. I think you need to give another question. That one's
okay.
hard.
Okay. No, that's fair.
See, I threatened before the podcast. See, before
these simple pleasures or something. I thought, I enjoyed my cup of coffee in the morning more than I ever did because I don't have to look at my schedule.
I threatened before the podcast started that if I didn't like the reckoning question, I was going to go off screen. So that's what that was all about.
Okay, we can.
It wasn't that I didn't like the. It wasn't that I didn't like the reckoning question. It's just that there were things that when I was practicing medicine that I do now. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by any of it. I dreamed about doing these things that I'm doing now, and now I'm doing them.
So let's try this one. What did you learn about yourself by building something from scratch that you didn't know? You had no idea about yourself, but you found it.
That I could do things that sometimes I don't give myself enough credit for, being able to do things that I end up doing. I mean, I think I'm pretty good at figuring my way through websites and social media and marketing and just kind of faking my way through it and figuring out how to do it. And I think that that's part of that don't give up philosophy, but that.
Do you ever miss being needed that the way a physician is needed?
Yes. I have, I don't know if it's reverse imposter syndrome. I still feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Um, I've explained to Brian before that, some of those other guests on your show have made me feel a little bit bad, but so I do miss that to a certain degree and wonder if I've not lived up to my potential. But at the same time, what defines our own personal joy and our own personal journey? I don't know.
I mean, I think I'm going to interject in the reckoning. I know that's against the rules, but
I'll allow it.
I think that that's a common anxiety, especially for people who are our audience, the high impact professionals. It's an identity loss, right? And so some people can't give up that identity and become, the guests who are continuing to volunteer or work in medicine in various capacities, and others give up that identity and do something else. You followed a passion and develop that kind of that hobby into something that's much bigger. But I think that comes with the territory of probably being a physician.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an overachiever all your life, and you all of a sudden are achieving in a different kind of way, you still wonder about achievements left behind. It's just part of the personality for sure. And I make it a point not to think about it too much. If I let myself go down that road, I can pretty quickly turn myself back around. So I don't dwell on it too much. I dwell on it mostly when I'm listening to this podcast.
Sorry to make you feel so bad.
Okay, last one. You've done extremely well, even with the interjection on the reckoning, which I allowed. So, what mattered to you at 45 that doesn't matter at all now?
Well, stuff, just trying to win the race to have stuff, that everybody kind of gets into in that time of life. I don't care about stuff anymore. I care about experiences, and I care about broadening my horizons, and that's kind of, I think, what I pursue most with my time now.
Yeah, I think, isn't that interesting that, when you have arrived, so to speak, that the things that you thought would mean that you arrived are no longer important.
I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So. I really, it's really more about how, it's really more about the experiences than the stuff.
Yeah. And that's why wealth does not equal money.
Exactly. That's why, that's why the old adage that people who have lots of money aren't happy.
Aaron?
You survived.
That was
it. That was, fantastic.
Fantastic. Excellent job. I think that was one of the finest reckonings we've had.
It could be the finest. I think that's going to go on the wall. It's going to go right back here on this section right here is the finest reckoning section.
I can't accept that, but...
All right. Well, let's close it down. Steve, thank you for joining us. I know that there was some reluctance, but I wouldn't let you say no. So I appreciate you coming on.
He would not.
But again, and it's because I think that your story will land with a lot of people, and I think it's impactful, and I appreciate you sharing it. We are now going to talk about with you off screen. So
Oh, okay. So then I guess I have to wait until the podcast publishes before I hear what you say.
either that, or I expect some gratuity as the editor of this podcast. So we'll see how that goes.
I'll wait. I can wait.
All right. Thanks again. All right. So Aaron, we are now in recap mode where we're going to talk about this episode with Steve. I thought it was very good. I thought there was a lot of great pearls that he brought out, but I want to hear from you first. Let's hear about it.
So we're still talking about this. Steve almost didn't do this interview because he didn't think his story measured up relative to the guests that we've had previously. And so the first question on my mind is, what does that say about physicians or high achievers in general? How they define success?
Well, I mean, when I thought a little bit more about that, I agree. I think he did. I think he was very honest and open about expressing what a lot of physicians are going through. And a lot of that is like, burnout rates are very high in medicine. There's a lot of dissatisfaction, and that may be with just their job or it could be their career. But, instead of just trudging along in a life that was making him miserable and unhappy, he made a change. And, making that change takes a lot of courage. It does. In many ways it's easier to stay, right?
No, yeah, no. The effort to overcome that inertia is hard for a variety of reasons. I think that we'll get to that as we kind of deconstruct the episode. But what stands out in true sibling fashion is the fact that you sort of twisted his arm to do the episode anyway. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what did you see in his story that maybe he doesn't or didn't see?
I think he doesn't see how common it is. I mean, and I think it's easy as you listen to our podcast, and he brought this out, but the other guests have done a lot of things and have put themselves out there and volunteered and done. They have a long resume, right? But I don't think that's not the norm. Steve's story is much more the norm I don't need to change the world. I want to find happiness. I just want to, stop running on the treadmill and find something that actually is purposeful and meaningful to me. And we had talked a little bit about this. There's a book that I really like from an author called Jordan Grummett. And the book is called The Purpose Code. And he talks about, he actually talked about how in his first book, which was essentially about finding a purpose in your retirement, a lot of people, that was anxiety driving. And because, as physicians, a lot of us go into medical school kind of with big purpose in mind, like we're going to save the world, or we're, going to cure cancer or whatever. And I think that's what drives us toward medicine. But it's also anxiety provoking to feel like you have to do that. And, so more important, Jordan Grummett's point is more important than big P purpose of changing the world or making a big impact or anything like that. It's finding your little P purpose, which is your passion, the thing that you really enjoy doing. And I think Steve was a great example of that, how he was able to pivot twice, get out of internal medicine initially, find something to create a career. And then when he was done with that career, to pivot again, find something that he actually enjoyed doing and reclaiming his time. And that's wealth. That's really wealth. And so he succeeded in my mind. And I don't know that he sees that.
Yeah, I think that before this, you and I have talked about kind of using the big P, little P purpose as a follow-on conversation in another episode. But certainly, it's interesting that finding the intersection of the virtue of labor that may appear to be a little P purpose, but also the intersection of what you value and the realization that, you're doing nobody any good if you've just burned yourself out, or if you are truly unhappy. It's the spread of that, not in your professional life, but in relationships is bad. And so having kind of the self-awareness that he did, and the willingness to take that risk and grind it out, I think that is in the back of a lot of people's minds of, they know they're in a spot where they have to do something. They don't know what that is. They have to do something, and they're unsure, and it's a little bit frightening. And so to see that, this person successfully executed, it's sort of like the ability to stand on the shoulders of giants. So I think, his story is important and relevant, and I'm glad that he shared it. One of the things he mentioned was reverse imposter syndrome, which I love that coining that phrase. He's still feeling like he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, and so I think that maybe you can speak to that as a recently transitioned, separated, retired physician. Does that ever go away, or is it just what high achievers carry on forever?
I think making change out of a high impact career invites criticism, right? It invites criticism externally, perhaps, but probably more so internally. I think lots of times we second guess ourselves and think other people are thinking that we're crazy. That one of the things that he said is, they all thought he was crazy when he left. And, maybe they did, but maybe many of them also thought it was awesome and that he was actually doing what they wish they had the courage to do. And, but I think that I think there's always an element of asking yourself, am I strong enough? Should I have done, should I be doing what I'm doing? And I do think that that's maybe is always there. I don't know. But I do like how he said that he, when he starts going down that road, he can quickly kind of turn himself back. And I think that's what you have to do, is just reset and say, what are my priorities now? And who am I answering to? Am I answering to, society or my partners or whoever, or am I answering to my family and the people who need me to be around and be happy?
Yeah, I think that's an important piece of it, is that element of self-confrontation and awareness that this is a thing, right? Like, you acknowledge it, you give it a name, you make it real. You know that it is I think it's par for the course with high achievers. I think that tenacity to be able to change direction, like any second shifter would do or will do, that is going to call you, kind of like you said, that always leads to that internal conflict and that questioning and that sort of antagonism internally, which is great when you are, that voice in your head is telling you to, keep on going, grind it out. You can do it. It is not great when it's like, hey, you probably screwed up. Like, what are we doing here? And so knowing which voice in your head to listen to, I'm sure that, from a medical perspective, us talking about voices in our heads is probably not the right way to put it, but you understand what I'm saying.
They're in our head and not just outside of our head that we're hearing.
Yeah.
No, I think, I also think it comes back to that whole idea of the sunk cost fallacy, right? Where the longer that the more effort that you put into becoming a physician or whatever other high impact career that you're involved in, the harder it is to leave. Because even if you're not happy anymore in that position, you put so much work into it, and you've kind of arrived at the top of the hill. It's hard to just set that aside, and that's why I think so many people just drag it on too long.
So he said, have a plan before you retire, which is concrete advice. Obviously, you and I, as financial advisors, like, well, yeah, that's obvious. Is it obvious to everyone, or do most people skip it?
I don't think most people put much time into the plan. I think they kind of think about, this sounds great. I'm going to do this and do that. But then a month later, they realize, okay, now what? Now that I've done all the things that I thought I was going to do, and either I've done them now and I hadn't really thought what beyond that, or I've done them and realized that that's not as fulfilling as I expected it to be. So yeah, I think a lot of people just throw it out there, but don't spend much time in defining exactly how it's going to work.
So I want your perspective on this. So he had the $5,000 TV gamble that saved his business. So it brings up a valid question that I think that people talk about and ponder is how much of success is luck versus persistence versus skill?
That sounds like a good reckoning question.
It is a good reckoning question.
Well, this is how I perceive that, or how I would answer that. Does luck and good fortune happen, and is it required to be successful? I would say yes, it happens, but you kind of create your own luck, right? So if you don't put yourself in the position to take advantage of the opportunities that come, and those opportunities, you can call them luck or you can call them opportunities. I look at it more as opportunity. And if you take advantage of that, then you become successful. And if you choose not to, then you don't. And so I think good fortune often makes things easier, but most people don't see all the work that goes into both being in the position to have that fortune happen to you, but also the work that comes afterwards.
Yes, and I think that's kind of what I gathered is that he had done all of this work and taught me like there was a grind going on, and so when that opportunity presented itself, luck, good fortune, whatever, he was already in a position, mentally and from a business standpoint, to fully leverage, to execute that option that was presented to him. So yeah, that was well done on answering that reckoning question.
Thank you.
So what does this mean for the audience, right? Like if somebody's listening and thinking, I don't want to build an empire, I just want to get out, what should they take from Steve's story?
I think they should take that, he said it a couple of times. He said, it's okay for retirement to be enjoyable. And I think as high achievers, I think we have to remind ourselves that we don't have to grind through retirement. We've grinded through our careers, and for most of us, that's been a long grind. It's okay now to allow yourself a reward, and you can still make an impact on those around you. And that, sometimes that takes a little courage, and sometimes it takes you silencing the alternate voice in your head that keeps telling you otherwise. But it's okay. It's okay. All right. That is the end of our episode. Thank you everyone for listening. We hope you're finding the value in these discussions as you contemplate your own second shifts. So please remember to like and subscribe to the channel and tell your friends if you're enjoying the content. We'll see you next time. Take care.
The work you did mattered, and you're not done. Welcome to What's Next.
Thank you for listening to The Second Shift. If this conversation landed with you, please download our free guide called The Second Shift Blueprint. 5 questions you and your partner should discuss before any major transition. Get it at secondshiftpodcast.com. That's 2 ndshiftpodcast.com. And if you're approaching a transition and want to talk through the financial strategy, we offer a complimentary 30-minute Second Shift audit. Details are at secondshiftpodcast.com/audit. Join us next week for another great episode. And remember, your life and identity doesn't end with retirement. It's just entering its second shift. The content shared in this podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered personal financial advice. You should always consult with a financial professional to determine what is appropriate for your individual circumstances.